check. All right. Is anybody out there? Voice check. All right, folks are signing on. Hello. Barranca Tower calling all glue troopers. Hello, all. Got this one in just under the wire. Well, since I'm here, let me go ahead and take this down. Turn this on. Surprise, surprise. I have toys on the table for today. Hello, everybody. Give the gang a chance to check in. Today's going to be live action day. We're going to do something in real time right here. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Very good. Very good. Let's see. Let me give a... I'm checking my delay right here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, looks like I've got about a 10-second delay. What it is I have two things up on the screen. I have the OBS program that runs the live stream, and then I have YouTube, which is showing when it comes out. And of course, it's got to go through servers and satellites. I've got to link up in outer space. But from the time I say something till the time it pops up on YouTube is about 10 seconds. Now, I can't call it back or anything, but it's just so as the questions populate, if it takes a little while for me to get a loop back around, it's just the built-in delay. Well, hello everybody, and yes, as Trey's pointed out, let's wish all the dads out there happy Father's Day. And I wore my Evil Max t-shirt just for the occasion. Let's see. Okay, so let's get cracking here. Today I brought, there'd been a lot of talk about vacuforming lately, so I pulled out the little Mattel vacuform machine that's been on my shelf forever. And I actually did have to read the little instruction pamphlet. I plugged it in here on the desk, and as I'm reading the instruction pamphlet, it begins smoking on me. And I was... let me show you. It starts doing this, and I was like, is it supposed to do that? But it says right here, and I have to change my glasses to read this, but reading out of the booklet, it says steps, let's see, step 3, 4, place plastic, swing the clamp. Step 6, plug in the cord, or allow the vacuform to warm up for 10 minutes. When your vacuform is new, the heating chamber will smoke for up to 5 to 10 minutes on the first time you turn it on. This is perfectly normal. You know, I really do long for the days when you would give kids chemistry sets that had enough explosive power to take over a small Caribbean nation, and you gave them play toys that had heating elements in them. It's a miracle we survived our childhood. So, I'm going to go ahead and plug this thing in because it's going to take a little while to warm up. And we shall talk a little bit about the vacuforming. And if the screen suddenly goes blank, you'll know I blew myself up. So, I just plugged it in, and if you see the smoke, not to worry. I'd gotten a few comments and questions about vacuforming, and someone also sent me a lengthy email today, this morning actually, with a lot of sites about making your own vacuform machines, which you can. This is a fun little toy. It's okay for vacuuming little parts, but it's amazing. For less than $100 or so, especially if you already have the vacuum cleaner, you can make a pretty impressive vacuform machine. Can you have maple syrup on your waffle, please? Yes, you may. So I was playing with it earlier and actually was able to vac a few little items. Like every kid, a lot of stuff was missing when I got this. It's the little race car body, and the first vac turned out like not so good, but the second one actually came out surprisingly well. And I mean, for what's basically a kid's toy, that's not too bad. And I used a couple of other mediums to try to vacuform some other stuff, and this is the first one I did. It's just something that was in there. Now we'll be talking about this, and we'll be doing a little vacuforming in real time. I'm just giving it a chance to heat up. Must have burned off. Nope. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit of smoke coming off of this thing. And if you look underneath it, and this is brilliant. I'll just do this with a plugged-in vacuform. You'll see the heating of the square part is the heating element tray, and the round part is the little pump for the air to go out when you vacuform it out. So this, of course, is the part that gets hot, and it actually gets reasonably warm. I mean, a kid could burn themselves. Not that I ever did that as a kid, probably because no one let me play with the thing. And you got the plantain and the two parts. And this one has two of these little trays that go in here, and these are the bases. And of course, these things make sure they have these pegs on them. The other one has little pinholes in it, although the other one I couldn't find, so I guess I didn't have it when I got this thing. These grooves are so the air can circulate, of course, to come out when it comes time to pump it. I'm sure you guys all know how vacuform works. You heat the plastic, throw it over the mold, pump the air out, it sucks the pliable plastic down, then cools very quickly, and poof, there you go. So I thought we'd play with this in real time while we're here. And I wanted to show you a couple of pictures of things that I really did vacuform for my models. The first one is the Neil Armstrong faceplate. When I bought this kit, this is the big monogram kit, and I didn't like the yellow tinted faceplate that came with it. I wanted to be clear. So it took a bunch of tries to get it, but I was able to get the faceplate to finally come out the way I wanted it to. The other thing that I did was the Broussard collectors for my Enterprise. The batteries died a long time ago. I haven't bothered to replace them. I think the wire broke on one because only one was working, but I put some little those little rubber balls you draw that make the little sparkly colors. They had a little battery in them. There's 59-cent kid's toy. I cut the rubber off of them, got the little sparkly LEDs, and just put them in there and wired them in. And so those are translucent red plastic Broussard collectors that when the battery's working and the lights were down, you could see the lights glittering inside. And and I use this very vacuform machine to do it. So it was pretty straightforward. That faceplate took a bunch. Actually, both of them took a lot of time to do, especially the faceplate. And the problem I had with that was that clear plastic. It didn't get very soft, and I finally wound up leaving on a heater for like 10 minutes or something for it to get soft enough. And I had a lot of misfires before I got these things worked out right, but they finally did get worked out right. But I tried again, and some of the same clear medium that I was using before, and you can see that this thing, here's the little race car with the plastic that comes with it. And then here was an attempt with the clear stuff. It's just, even though it's very lightweight, it's a different material, I guess, and it just did not vac out very well. So not all plastics are gonna work easily, or the same. And I finally using that same clear medium, using a relatively flat object to vacuform. I finally got something to mold right, but I think I left it down here on the heater for, gosh, 8-10 minutes before it slices, dices, makes julienne fries, and boy, can it mold a canopy. I actually did try to mold some canopies on here, but I made the mistake of using the original canopy as the mold. And the big failing there was that it cracked those canopies. If you're going to use your actual canopy, you need to pack it with something like clay or putty or something that'll give it some rigidity, because when I pushed down, the actual acrylic broke. Polybutyrate. Okay, there you go. Is this thing warm enough? Now, I can put my hand over and feel the heat. I'm sure if I touch it, I'd get a boo-boo, so I'm not. But I'm not going to bore you with how to make one of these things, because there are 100 YouTube videos on how to do it. And some of them, the nice thing about the ones you make, even with a vacuum cleaner, which it seems to be what everybody uses, is that you can make some pretty big plantains. And there's a guy who made a full-size C3PO. Now, he made it a piece at a time, of course, but he made a full-size 3CPO costume out of stuff that, I mean, I don't think it cost him $100 to put the whole vacuform together. They're actually very simple machines. And, of course, the race car goes on the plantain. I guess the easiest way to do it is this way. And let me grab, what color have I not used? I haven't used the red. And it tells you point blank to use thinner ones for more detailed stuff and thicker ones for less detailed stuff. But these clear ones are the thinnest ones, but the material they're made of just doesn't seem to heat up as well. Also point out, I'm not sure where I got these. It probably came with it, but they look like some kind of aftermarket thing. They don't have little holes in the edges, which these do. And of course, you place a piece of plastic in there, sandwiches in place. When I was a little kid, my older brother and sister had one of these, and I didn't really understand exactly what it did. I was 3-4 years old, I guess, and so it's mid 60s. I put that on and start the clock. You know what? Let me put this thing in airplane mode so we don't get calls like we did last time. Okay, and clock and stopwatch is running. So I'm going to give that at least, well, since I just turned it back on, I'll give it 4 or 5 minutes. They say when you see the plastic start to discolor, which means it's, it's thinning out so much, it's getting translucent, that you've waited too long, you need to hurry up and go ahead and do it. But that seems to be actually, at least for something like this, when it molds best. And one other thing I learned is when this is the pump handle right here to pump the air out, and it says use short strokes. If you try to use the whole stroke, it doesn't do as well. Real fast half strokes seem to work better. And I'll put that on the mold, and we'll give that a couple of minutes. Just use a waffle iron. Hey, you never know. Any heat, really all it is a heating element and something suck the air out of it and hold it in place. So any heating, you could make one using probably just about a toaster, a waffle iron, a curler, a heating curler thing for the hair, just about anything. If it'll get, all it has to do is get the plastics off. If you guys ever seen like Face Off, they got those really cool vacuform machines that have the heating element up above, and they put the plastic in and slide it up and then put the thing on the plantain. And when it's ready, they just throw it down, whoosh, and it automatically sucks the air. I think the air is going all the time. And it makes some really incredible stuff super fast. And, of course, vacuform is a great way to knock a lot of stuff out real fast. Oh, John, yeah, it does. I haven't used this thing in years, and it took me about 3 tries to get a really good one. I mean, I could actually etch this out, and it's over there somewhere, because it comes with a little body, a little chassis with the little wheels and everything that you can copy. And nifty little race car. I have to see if I can trim that out and save it for something. You could also vacuform something like that and just put it, like as a wall hanger somewhere. Just kind of a horizontal, a vertical diorama. You can paint the car and paint the little wheel areas black and maybe glue some half wheels on it, and then paint this like the road and everything, and just put it up on the wall as a little kind of diorama thingy. And anyway, that does not appear to be soft yet. Use the Mark 1 probe. Ooh, yeah, it is actually kind of soft. But I would recommend using something else. It's getting pliable. Not there yet. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. I'm going to slide this back where I can get the angle on it when the time comes. But I haven't had a need to do any vacuforming in a long time. But now that I'm kind of getting back and realize how easy it is, I might. I would imagine if you wanted to make it like for background set dressing kind of thing, you could probably vacuform parts from a model or partly built model, just if you wanted to etch out and put in the background just to add a little flourish to a diorama or make a destroyed vehicle or something like that. And I suppose with something, if you had a big enough one, if you got something that had strong enough parts, you could probably vac copies of the kit. And well, guys, I'm glad everyone could make it. I know a lot of you guys have Father's Day stuff going on. I'm just grateful that you could make it. All right, let me just go over 3 minutes. Let's just give it a quick touch. Oh yeah, it's sagging fairly well. I'm going to give a little more, another minute or so. It's not quite done baking. It's mostly done, but not all the way done. And all right, I'm starting to see some nice sag in the plastic. I don't know if you can see that. It's starting to sag a fair bit. Say another 45 seconds. Okay, wait till it gets on down to the puck. Well, it's got a little further to go. There was one other picture I was going to show you real quick. This one? No, not that one. That the vacuform machine has a set of air vents right here, so that heat and air, everything can escape, because it keeps everything just the right distance. They both kind of set the distance, but they allow the air in also. And there, right there, you can see that was the piece of green plastic on it. So everything's kind of pre-measured. Of course, that green glow underneath is just the light going through the plastic. But of course, it's very important to keep the plastic at just the right distance from the heat source, so that you don't wind up melting it. All right, I think that's 5 minutes, and it's sagging pretty well. It's getting down there. I think it's just about ready. Let's see if I can do this in real time. 3, 2, 1. Nice. That's even better than the other one. Well, alrighty then. That ain't bad. And of course now pluck it out of there. That is the crispest one I've done yet. Getting better with time. Oh, come on. Out you go. Stay, lads. And of course, there's the mold. Now, this mold is made for the one that has the little slant groove in it. That's the one that was missing when I got this, so I just made do. But even on the other plant, then it seems to have worked pretty well. And not bad, eh? I mean, that's about as good as this machine's going to do, but that'd be good enough to make some parts that even got the seat detail. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a little bit of seat detail in there, and it managed to copy that. So there you go, now you can see it. Yeah, NASA's going to be using 3D printing. Why 3D print when a vacuform will do? So Since folks have been somehow we've been talking about some of the comments about vacuuming had come in. I'm going to unplug this thing before I forget and set the house on fire. But I thought you guys would like a little real-time production. And okay, stop, reset, and just close that out. And you can tell it's Mattel. It's swell. And that was a cool motto back in the 60s. Or, but vacuform. So, that little, I think people still sell these things. They make a gazillion of them. They probably get it for $20 on eBay. I think that's what about it paid for this one. And I will take this and set it over here in a nice safe place before I wind up touching it. There's no off switch. It's just on when you plug it in. So, is everybody enjoying their Father's Day, I hope? Yes, you know, John, the Sanwa guy here, was mentioning he had this little tiny Dornier 217 that you guys are all going to see in the next viewers build, and that whole airplane would probably fit on this card. It was a really small scale. He made the canopy for it because the actual kit, it wasn't worthwhile. It was so meh. And I think that's part of what got me doing this, is because I was like, oh yeah, I got. But there have been a few other VAC comments lately, and I don't remember what they were, but that I remembered. You know, something that's really got big, sturdy parts like the that Lindbergh stagecoach that Paul sent to me recently, that I just reboxed back in the box from the other one. He had sent it to me in a big box because shipping is very expensive and was really big. So by putting it in a smaller box, not sending the box it was originally wrapped in, saved him a lot of shipping cost. And I said, well, I've got this box from the last one and it's empty, so I just put everything in there. And that something like that has really stout parts would be something that would probably vac out pretty well, because a lot of them are fairly flat, and you technically could make a lot of lightweight copies of it. And there's really a lot you can do with this stuff. Of course, generally speaking, it's just for skins and shells. One of the things I see it being really handy for, more than anything else, is things like canopies and headlights and just whatever, because you can do clear parts with it. And we all know how much fun clear parts are to make, and it's nice to be able to make or copy it. For example, well, just any canopies, whatever, just to keep making copy after copy after copy until you get them right. It's just really makes life a lot easier. And as we all know, most acrylic glass on models isn't to scale, especially on airplanes. The canopies are always way too thick. They have to be, or they'd be so brittle, and which is why a lot of model builders like the vac canopies. They're more to scale. Here you can make as many copies as you want. So I just thought that would be something fun to kick off with. The other thing, there are a couple of folks that made some comments. I got my recent last issue of FSM Fine Scale Modeler, and you know, I think I have resubmitted pictures of them, because sometimes I forget if I had sent pictures to them, so I just sent a bunch of pictures of that Godzilla Metal Luna monster thing that I made, and I forgot. They may be getting this for a second time, in which case they're probably, what, this guy doesn't take the hint? We didn't show his picture last time. Well, somebody made an observation that I had to agree with. I have a lot of models that have, well, maybe 6 or 7 models that have showed up on their website. I've only had one show up in the magazine. That was that little Aurora Cherokee. But I've had 6, 7, 8, something like that, 9 of them that have been in the online gallery. And I go back and check once a month or once every other month to see if, any chance one of my models popped up there. And somebody pointed out something, and they were right. They haven't updated that thing going on a year now. They used to put stuff out every month, I believe it was. And what I was also, and that got another thing that was kind of dovetailed with another thing I was thinking about. And I'm not trying to knock the magazine. I enjoy the magazine a great deal. I imagine they're suffering like everybody else, but this is the entire reader's gallery. 3 pictures from the last issue of the magazine. And I had noticed the reader's gallery was getting smaller and smaller, and I know they're getting a ton of submissions, probably more than ever before. And I know it's very difficult to print. It's expensive to print in color and everything, but I don't know what's happened over at FSM. I did notice that there's a different editor. Don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I imagine they're getting slammed like everybody else with the current world situation. They're doing what they can to keep the cost down, but you would think the readers' galleries, people send them the stuff for free, so you would think that I mean, these are the beautiful work. And once again, I am in awe of anybody who can build a motorcycle that looks that good. I mean, because every little detail shows. That's one of the beauties about motorcycles, is that all that hard work is visible for people to see what you did. The Vincent Black Shadow was the most difficult one I built because it was an old generation motorcycle. It had a little chrome T-handle air pump, where you put the air on the tire. God, brain fart. But I just, and it looked okay, but and it was not that big a scale, but it was probably 112, something like that. But those old bikes have so many little protrusions on them, and I was actually kind of I was actually kind of impressed by the kit, but it was a nightmare to build. But I was proud of the build when it was done. It was for the same fellow I built the Stagecoach for. I actually built that one up my crash pad in New York while I was sitting on reserve up there. That was when I first started taking models with me. If I ever go back on reserve out of my home domicile, I will definitely take models to the crash pad. It's a lot easier than traveling with them. And speaking of which, I think I go back to work on Tuesday, so next week there's not going to be a lot of content. So Andy's saying that Calmback has scaled back on others. Yeah, I would imagine they're just cost-cutting measures. And I do miss the specials. The readers, to me, and I mean, I like FSM for all the stuff. I like all you show the new stuff that's coming out, and a lot of magnificent builds that make you strive to work harder. But to me, personally, the readers gallery is my favorite part because it's what people are doing with their models. They're not professionals. And it's probably one reason I got into doing the viewers builds. Everybody's having a good time, but a lot of us, we build our models, we put them on the shelf, and maybe we're the only ones that get any enjoyment out of them, and that's okay. I mean, hopefully you're building for yourself, but it's nice to be able to share. We all love this hobby. We like to see what other guys are doing. We'd like to show off our work, and yeah, some of the bigger companies, are, like Tamiya and Airfix, do put out their own magazines. Of course, obviously for obvious reasons, it's on their product. If I was going to put out a magazine, it would and I say this sort of like, I'm not being really serious here because there's no way I'm going to put out a magazine, and 2, I'm not trying to be critical of the ones that are out there, but if I was to somehow make a model magazine, it would probably be more orientated towards what the people who buy the magazine are building and what they're doing. Because this is, I mean, obviously, Fine Scale Modelers is a subscriber base, but it's also, it's advertisers are where its real money comes from. So I'm sure there are certain things they have to promote just to keep the vendors, the advertisers, because usually most magazines, as I understand it, subscription rates barely cover the paper. It's actually the advertisers that foot the bill for the magazine. And I'm sure it's difficult. Mike Mashat, who, by the way, just put out a great video on American Airlines airliners, their paint schemes and history. Well, he's been in charge of a couple of magazines. I should probably talk to him about it, but I don't think that's something, an endeavor I could take on. But it is an interesting idea. But it would be builder oriented, and again, I don't want anybody to think I'm knocking FSM. It would be orientated around what are you guys doing. And now I do know, because I did submit an article to Fine Scale Modeler one time with pictures and everything, and the build, it was a kit bashed F106 that I turned into an SSTO. It wasn't that great, and I was pretty sure they wouldn't go with it because of the very amateurish quality, but it was an exercise for me to sort of give this take a stab at this. And hey Bruce, how you doing? Um, so that was something that I thought would be. It was an interesting experience. They sent all the stuff back to me and said, thank you for submitting, but blah blah blah. I'm like, well, you could have kept it. It was a computer disk. I didn't really need it back, but okay. Um, and I was sure when I sent it, it wouldn't be. And I think I could be wrong, but I think they have a group of modelers that provide most of their material for them because they know the photography quality and the build quality, and they're very skilled at both, and they you know but I would love to do a magazine that was just, and of course it would have to take advertisement to survive, but it would be what people are building. It would be a quarter of the magazine would be nothing but pictures of what viewers have built. At my AMA magazine on RCs usually has a pretty good selection of just people who are members of AMA sending in pictures of them with their airplanes. Yeah, I don't think I would be doing the previews and stuff like Chuck just pointed out. Is that uh, the internet has really changed everything, and I don't. I'm not knocking the internet. I mean, here we are on it, obviously, but print media is ailing, and I don't think that's any shocking news to anybody. Uh, the online world is just so much faster, and it doesn't cost anything to send electrons. You can put big, pretty, cool, full color pictures on a website, and if somebody wants to print one out, they can. And that's a whole nother. Yeah, it's just but the nice thing about magazines, of course, is you can roll one up, stick it in your bag, take it out, and you know you don't need internet access to enjoy a magazine. So they still have a place, but I think they are, if they haven't already, they're certainly becoming a secondary source of information, and that's kind of the one thing about magazines and print media in general. I think is that they have an advantage though, is that that an editor and a staff put this together, so there's a certain professional quality, and whereas anything can go on the internet. I don't want to get off on the whole fake news thing, but at least when you get a newspaper or a magazine, you figure, well, this got vetted by somebody. Unfortunately, that's a whole nother debate. Yeah, batteries dying is definitely not an issue with print. Um, the oh, hey John, you made it. Glad to see it. John, I was just making race cars with a vacuform machine earlier. Uh, Ow! Don't grab the hot part. I had dragged out the Mattel vacuform. Um, the Now I just have to vacuform a little Tazio Nuvolari to put in there. So anyway, speaking of who was just mentioned, the Buffalo, Chris, you just mentioned the old Airfix Brewster Buffalo. By the way, that little 1/72nd scale Brewster Buffalo I have for my Battle of Midway thing is actually Airfix kit, the British one repainted. And because we've been talking about the Buffalo just lately, just before we came out here, I started doing my homework on it. I thought that'd be kind of an interesting thing to talk about. And there was, real quick, for those who are not familiar, this is a beautifully made Czech Models 1/32nd scale United States Marine Corps F2A-3 Rooster Buffalo. This is painted up as part of the squadron that was at Midway Atoll during the Battle of Midway, where they were seriously thrashed by the Japanese. But I did not get any permissions to use this picture, so I made sure to put a full credit on it. In fact, let me just make this puppy full screen. There we go. And a gentleman named Ian Robertson. This is on the Hyperscale website. Now, he's got a lot of pictures out there of it, and he did a flawless. This is the very model that I'm building, and he did a magnificent job on it. So obviously the model can be made to look good. As you guys know, I have been running into a bunch of issues with mine, Let's see. I started putting one wing on it today, and it's out there. I'm just going to give it a long time to harden because since it's just a pair of butt joints, I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I used. Let's just say I used a generous amount of glue to make bloody sure the thing stays on. And there it is. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, there. Oh, I highlighted the wrong one. Sorry, here we go. There it is. It's out there in the tarbis right now, just like that, hardening. And the when that one gets secure, I'll put the other one on. Now, the Czech models airplane, you can tell just by looking at this. In fact, I'll even zoom in on it a little bit for you. And some of these blemishes I didn't even see till I got them on camera. The top of the wing, I used the top of the wing for alignment, but you can tell there's a little misalignment with the bottom of the wing. And the thing, and I didn't realize until I read the Hyperscale article, this was a limited run kit, which explains why there aren't a lot of alignment pins or a lot of other things. It's a real interesting world between a really good kit with a lot of options and a really rough kit with a lot of poor fits. And it is definitely made for the skilled modeler. So it's a good challenge, and it's a good subject matter, and there's a lot you can do with it. You can make almost any version of the airplane with it. And so a lot of you guys had sent me information about the Buffalo, and apparently the airplane, although many consider one of the worst airplanes ever put in the military service, it still seems to have a bit of a following, which I don't find particularly surprising. So I thought I would talk about this particular little airplane for a while, for a few minutes, just to now. And I learned a lot when I started doing the research. I knew the basic history of the airplane, but a lot about it I didn't know. This is a pre-war design, and it actually beat the famous Grumman Wildcat to win the contract with the U.S. Navy. But what I didn't know, and that's what this picture is referenced to, is that particular American Buffalo belongs to the United States Army Air Force. And I had no idea that the Army Air Corps or Army Air Force had ever actually had the Buffalo. And it turns out that the airplane has a much more convoluted history than I thought. A lot of people know the popular stories about it, that it was shredded at Midway and in the Commonwealth aircraft. The Japanese made pretty quick work of the British ones and those in the Dutch East Indies. But turns out there's a whole lot more to it. So the Navy orders this thing, and the first one, actually, according to the pilot reports I've read, it had its problems, but it was, for a plane came out in the late 30s, it was a little underpowered. So they modified it, put a bigger engine on it, and okay, the Navy was like, okay, we'll take 40 of them. And the Navy started putting them on carriers, and the gear started collapsing because it turned out that weird landing gear it has just was not up to carrier operations. And the Finns, the Finnish, were screaming for airplanes because they had the Russians knocking at their door. So the Navy agrees. The Navy only took about a dozen of them, and agrees to give the rest of its airplanes to the Finns. And this, actually, that one's in Dutch markings. I'm sorry. Where's the Finnish one? Here it is. There we go. And of course, as most of you guys know, that backward blue on white swastika is not a Nazi emblem. That was actually the Finnish emblem before the war. During the war, obviously, it is not anymore. So the Finns get them, and they actually did pretty well with them. They called it the Ace Maker. A lot of their pilots really were racking up the kills. Now, this was an export model called the 139, the Brewster Model 139. And, I'm sorry, 239. 139 was the original Navy. The original Navy, Brewster designation for the one they gave the Navy was the 139. The export version was the 239. They denavalized it, got rid of the arrestor hook, ripped out the life raft, ripped out the radio direction finder behind the cockpit. stripped out a lot of the naval specific stuff, sent it to the Finns, who made good use of it. They made their own modifications to it, I think, including eventually putting their own guns on it. The Finns operated for a couple of years with surprising success, and this was the early model that didn't have all the armor plate on it, and it didn't have the big heavy guns on it. But I don't know how much you guys, I don't want it'd be a long story to get into the whole continuation war and everything, but the Finns were fighting mostly the Russians. They needed help, so they let the Germans in, unfortunately, well, the Finns were in a weird and a very unhappy situation. Like the Poles, they were a victim of their geography between Russia and Germany. They needed the German help to fight the Russians. Well, once they took help from the Germans, the Americans, even though we understood why they were doing, we cut off our support to them. So they started having problems keeping the planes flying because they didn't have the parts needed. So by the, 44, so they were relegated to training. But they did a real good job with them. We also sold a bunch of them to the Belgians, to the French, actually to the Belgians, and they ran into trouble because Belgium fell. So we diverted the ones. This is actually a picture of the ones that were supposed to go to the Belgians. They're in Belgian markings, and when Belgium fell, we weren't really sure what to do with them. So they said, well, you know what? We'll give them to the French. And so the ship was rerouted to France. And some of them were offloaded, and there were more on their way when France fell. So the one on the bottom was sent to Martinique. And they sent a batch of them to the Caribbean island Martinique, which was still French, but everybody was worried that, well, what if it goes Vichy? You know, those things might be used against us. And then the buffaloes that were in Martinique that were all canvassed up and everything mysteriously blew up one night. Nobody knows what happened. And to this day, nobody really knows exactly who did it. Did we do it? Did the Free French do it? Did the natives in the island, not natives, the locals to the island? But somebody blew them up, made sure that they didn't fall in the hands of the Germans. So the French and the Belgians never got a chance to operate them. The British operated a bunch of them. And, it really was a star-crossed airplane. If you notice the bottom center photograph, the Buffalo sitting on the ground with its engine missing with a Junkers 88, Junkers 52, old Iron Annie flying over it. The Brits, you see the one in the upper right on a carrier. They didn't operate them off carriers. They took them off carriers and delivered them to Crete. They got there the day the Germans attacked. So a bunch of them loaded up with fuel and hauled off to Egypt, but at least one of them had to stay behind. And of course, the Germans caught enough of them that it didn't. I guess it didn't really matter. Nobody really wanted the things, but it was just poor airplane was star-crossed. But the British did send a lot of them to the Far East Command, and they got pretty badly thrashed. And it wasn't entirely, but what I didn't appreciate was how many different versions this plane was. Every country had a lot of changes made to the airplane. Denavalizing the aircraft lightened it up a lot, but a lot of them got rid of that little retractable tail wheel and put a big fixed tail wheel on it because it worked better on grassy fields. Okay, makes sense, but it adds drag. Loses a little weight, but adds drag. But a lot of them, they had a weird gun arrangement. Originally, it was like a 50 caliber and a 30 caliber in the cowling with the option to put 50 calibers in the wings. But the performance of airplanes, as people were putting self-sealing fuel tanks on them and armor plates behind the pilots, they started getting heavier. So they started pulling guns out of the wings to lighten them up. And the problem was it was just an outdated design that they kept, but the company was set up to produce them. But another problem they ran into, and it was the Dutch that had this problem. I have a Dutch one up here somewhere. Here it is. That's a Dutch Buffalo. And I believe that is the 339. Now this airplane, really, they were trying, I'll give them that, but it had a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems was there was a big shortage of engines. And it used the same engine as a DC-3. So what What Brewster was doing, it could not get enough new engines. And by the way, these are factory new airframes. They couldn't get enough engines, so they were getting the engines off of old airliner DC-3s and sending them to Wright to be refurbished, and then putting basically used airliner engines on the airplanes. And the Dutch actually were so desperate for engines that they were taking the airframes without engines and stealing engines off KLM DC-3s. So they had no end of maintenance problems. And of course, the airplane didn't fare too well, as we've already discussed. But they kept ordering more of them. And in fact, they got the last one, was the 339E model, and they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. Well, the Army Air Corps wound up getting a batch of them in, I think, 43 down in Australia. The Army Air Force down in Australia, 42 or 43, I think it was 43. The United States Army Air Force that was in Australia was screaming for fighters. And they managed somehow to get a bunch of export model Buffaloes and send them to the Army Air Corps, who got them and couldn't hand them over to the Australians fast enough. So the Australians got them, and because the Aussies needed whatever they could get their hands on. And they flew them around for a while, said, yeah, we'll use these for training and reconnaissance. And I think it was a smart thing that the Australians replaced them all within a year and never took them into combat, which was a good idea. It turns out the airplane really does have a complicated history. And these airplanes, depending on what model you had, they were different lengths. And they had it was not the same airplane rewrap. They had different engines, sometimes different propellers. They were constantly swapping out gun sights. The Marine Corps had that little tube telescope sight, but all the foreign countries ripped them out and either put ring and bead sights or reflector sights in them. But the British put reflector sights in all of them. And at some points, Brewster was so hurting for parts, it was sending airplanes that were not identical. You order 8 of an airplane, 3 would have telescope sights, 4 would have reflector sights, a few would have ring and bead sights. It's just whatever. This one's got a brand new factory fresh engine. These 3 all have used airliner engines. I mean, it was Take care, John. Thanks for checking in. So it was an airplane with it. And then it didn't help that Brewster had so many administrative problems, as I've mentioned before, that the government came in and took over operating the company. And they put out another airplane, a dive bomber. And I'm not sure it's entirely Brewster's fault. See, before the war, Brewster had only made subcomponents for airplanes. They had never built their own airplane. They built a pre-war dive bomber that was okay for the time. So, they can build airplanes, and they kind of got in over their head. And with enough time and material, it probably could have been turned into a decent airplane. It did help they finally put a bigger engine on it, but it was never enough. And the simple fact was they were just pushing an outdated design. They did have some designs for some new airplanes, but I think they're the Brewster Buccaneer. That's right. That's the dive bomber. There's actually a training video of it on YouTube that I stumbled onto. It looks kind of like a slimmed out Helldiver, but apparently it flew like crap, and is what I've been able to find on it. And the Boomerang. Well, I think the Boomerang does look like an AT-6. The Commonwealth Aircraft down in Australia made some of their own aircraft, which looked a lot like American trainers a little bit. But we actually saw one down in Fort Lauderdale, an NA-65, which is actually a fighter plane that was based on essentially the AT-6 with a bigger engine. And there were some countries that needed airplanes that bought them just because it's what they could afford. It was never much of a fighter plane. It wouldn't have done well against a Zero, but if you're going up against some military force that doesn't have air assets or has outdated. But one thing we when we think about it, we always tend to think of the the Moonbat, yeah. And Moonbat would make an interesting model. We tend to think of, the Mustang versus the Messerschmitt or the Focke-Wulf, or the Zero versus the Wildcat or the Hellcat. In other words, the top shelf airplanes of their days, the F-16 versus the MiG-29. But a lot of parts of the world, people were still flying biplanes, Polycarpovs and Fokkers and stuff most people never, even I haven't heard of. Everyone, what the heck is that? I figure that a lot of these, look at the Poles are flying the PZLs. I was looking recently at the Polish campaign, and I didn't realize just how in many ways how poorly run the Luftwaffe campaign in Poland was. Contrary to the myth, they did not wipe out the entire Polish Air Force on the ground. They got a good chunk of it, but they still put up a fight. What I found was interesting is that some of the Polish pilots in those gull-wing, fixed-gear PZLs were actually successful against Messerschmitts. They knew to play to their strengths. Messerschmitt showed up. They went into an aerobatic routine. The Messerschmitt was simply too fast and heavy to follow in. But then the 109 had the option of, I can jump into battle or I can leave because I got 100 miles an hour on you. But there were several cases of the very poor communications between the German ground forces and air forces, and the ground forces would move beyond their lines and get bombed by Stukas. So it's always more complicated than it seems. And it's just the same thing with... I'll give you an example, a couple of classic examples of where the more modern airplane was considered inferior to what it replaced, or at least less liked. Obviously, the Helldiver replacing the old SBD Dauntless. Now, the Dauntlesses, they stopped production in 44, and they were pretty much out of service by the end of the war. But a lot of guys who flew the barge, the SBD, when they went to the Helldiver, the Helldiver was faster, carried a bigger bomb load, had more range, more power, big four-bladed prop, but it was a tricky airplane to fly, a lot of bad habits, and a lot of mechanical problems, a lot of electrical systems that didn't. We're talking about 1940s solenoids, and ask anybody that's owned a vintage car about that. And the another example was the old Grumman Duck and the Curtiss biplane that was float plane that was used on the during the war. Well, they replaced it with the Kingfisher, the Vought Kingfisher, which was a monoplane. And they figured, well, a monoplane will do better. Well, it turned out the Kingfisher, which was not a bad airplane, but it was underpowered. It had trouble getting off the water. Sometimes I actually know a gentleman who was a radio man in one of them, radioman gunner, and he was talking about the old Grumman Duck. You could get off of still water, wasn't a problem. But sometimes the Kingfisher was just bagged down with fuel, that little dinky engine on it. They would have had a destroyer go out and do some donuts and cut some wake so the airplane would have something to ramp off of to break the seal off the water. And oh gosh, there's quite a few in history like that. And the ironic part of that was the airplane that was supposed to replace the Kingfisher, I think it was a Seamew, was even worse. It was like American float planes were progressively getting worse. And of course, they eventually got replaced by helicopters. But so there was no shortage of airplanes that and it didn't. And when you're talking about airplanes, the Buffalo, one other thing, it did not help that it had that bizarre landing gear on it. And there's an old saying, and I think no airplane personifies this better than the British Spitfire. If it looks right, it flies right. It's an elegant, beautiful airplane that was beloved by all that flew it. And you look at some airplanes like the Buffalo, and it just looks wrong. And it's squat, and it has that weird landing gear, and it is a way over complex landing gear system too. I mean, levers are going up, arms are bending, and over center levers are coming out of place. And there's, to my knowledge, the only real Buffalo there's one or two museums. One's in Finland, and I think there's one in the Netherlands or someplace, and they're like the only two real ones. Supposedly we have one off the end of the runway in Midway, but the Park Service is like, thing's been under seawater for 70 years, just leave it there. And let's see. And now for something completely different. This time I'm doing this model car different. I am not painting anything, and I got the chassis built. I've got the interior put together, and this is just a test fit. I have not glued it together, but I want to get I actually managed to put some pretty nasty scars on my model cars that fortunately you can't see very well, because I painted everything and then tried to test fit it. And I don't know about you guys, but I've had some issues getting car chassis to properly seal. with the bodies and everything. And one thing I learned in this test fit is once the body's in place, I don't really even have to glue the interior in place. It friction fits. So I am going to try to, now I'll take everything apart, do the chassis in black, then paint the mufflers and exhaust pipes, which I had to glue in before, because the way the bottom works. But this is an AMT kit, and I was surprised at how much flash there was on it. And but this one's actually test fitting very nicely. This is the Olds 442. And anybody out there ever have a 442? They were the last one I saw with in pop culture was in Demolition Man. It was in 1970. That's the one he had. That Stallone and Sandra Bullock come busting out in. And I had been to a vintage car place recently, seen a much older version. I think it was actually a 440, but maybe it was a 442. But it's funny. It's actually supposed to be considered a real sports car, but you don't hear people talk about them like the way they do Trans Ams and stuff. It's kind of like the forgotten muscle car of the 70s. But it's although I had to scrape a lot of flash off, I think the molds are getting old because this is a re-release. But everything fit well. Didn't have a single. I only dropped one part, and because it was white, I was able to find it in 10 seconds. Hallelujah! So this has actually been a mercifully easy kit so far. I don't have the engine in there. Like I said before, I'm going to build the engine separately and keep it outside the model. Just speaking for myself, I don't like to pose them with the hood up. I just think it breaks up the lines, and if you have the hood down, you can't see all that beautiful work. So I'll build the engine and put it on the side, and that's and I thought, well, you can just not glue the hood in so you can show it to people. But I was like, yeah, like that ever happens. I get about one guest a year over here. When you think Oldsmobile, and this is maybe I'm being unfair, I think the 442 is a really cool car, but when you think of Oldsmobile, I think you tend to think luxury cars, not sports cars. I wonder if that's why the car wasn't just, better known, how can I put this? Not better known, but more in the public consciousness. Let me crank the volume up here a little bit. I think, test it. There we go. All right. I'm sorry, guys. I just backed away from the microphone without realizing it. Let's see. Well, I don't really think I had anything else set up to talk about. I noticed a couple of folks were happy to see that I was getting another car on the table. And I am happy to have more than one thing on the table, because something like that Buffalo, you have to stop. You just let things harden, and I need something else to do. Yeah, I think Gojira's right. When you thought Oldsmobile, you just did not think, cool ride, which is it's like Buick. Some people, or Pontiac, which is ironic because Pontiac put out some of the most memorable sports cars before the GTOs came out. Pontiac was considered like, what the car that your granddad drove. And man, they managed to break out of that mold pretty well. But Oldsmobile just doesn't seem like they ever doesn't seem like they ever broke out of that image like Oldsmobile did. Excuse me, Oldsmobile didn't break out of that image the way Pontiac did. And also, speaking of things that are changing, I don't know if any of you guys know who Jonathan Parshall is, but he and Anthony Tully wrote a book called Shattered Sword, which is considered one of the definitive books on the Battle of Midway. He writes books mostly about the Pacific Naval War. He's working some others right now about naval night warfare. It makes you appreciate how much ships change over time. And but there has been a little bit of call it new scholarship, and I don't know if you guys know this, but one of the biggest mishaps the Japanese had during the Battle of Midway was after they'd lost their carriers, was when they had a couple of cruisers run into each other because an American submarine popped up on the surface all of a sudden. And the way the story goes was, of course, the submarines would come up at night to run the diesels to charge their batteries. And this is, I believe it was a Gato class boat. But anyway, Tambor pops up and it's kind of hazy. So he sticks at the periscope, looks clear. Submarine comes up. The Japanese see it. They've got 4 cruisers and 4 destroyers in trail heading for Midway. They're going to go bomb the snot out of Midway just as sort of a payback. And I guarantee you that flotilla could have done a lot of damage to Midway, especially at night. While they see the submarine, they assume they're being attacked. Signals get confused, and two of the cruisers collide, knocking about 80 feet of bow off of one of them. And which the next day or two, the airplanes from Midway and the carriers would hunt them down. They would damage one of them, sink the other. So that's how the Japanese wound up losing that cruiser at the Battle of Midway. And apparently there's some new scholarship that's come out on exactly what happened to cause that collision. But I was just thinking, I don't build that many ships. And there's all these little, especially on a modern vessel, all these little bits and bobs that go on a ship, a battleship, a destroyer, and not a clue what they are. Sometimes the instructors will say, well, that's a radar gun director or something. And when you think about it, I don't think anything out there has more complex lines than like a World War II battleship or destroyer. And Bruce recently did, I believe it was the Arizona. Beautiful job. And it'll be in the next viewer's build. And you look at, and then I'll tour these ships. And, when you're building your model, this is this annoying little plastic piece you can't get to glue into place. But then you get on the ship and you realize the thing is, it's this big and it's made of steel and it's bolted down, when you tour a ship. And kind of brings back that all these little bits and bobs matter. And, that's a radar this or a gun director that or a stanchion or a capstan or something. And I never get over the fact that these things are so annoying when you're building a 1 to 400 scale model, but then you go out and see the real ship models, how big all this stuff is. And makes you want to, when you go back, build your next model to do it justice. And I have couple of one reason I haven't built that Gato class that's up on top of my stash is because I simply have no place to put it when I'm done. And the inside the house, our glass cabinets are primarily aircraft, science fiction, and spacecraft. That's the bulk of it. Television, sci-fi. We have an entire sci-fi cabinet, and there's one with the Godzilla on top, and the Star Treks and Star Wars and all that stuff. The other one's aircraft. The other one's is mostly aircraft also. And I put a bunch of the cars down on the bottom shelf that I've built recently, and my wife was like, "What are those doing down there?" And she has complete authority on anything that goes in the house has to pass inspection first. And she really loves having the Felix stow up there on top of the airplane shelf. And it really does look regal up there. But I am either going to have to build myself a dusting schedule and get some air, or I'm going to have to make a case for it, one of the two. That is not the kind of airplane you can dust off. I mean, there's just way too much rigging on it. And I know one of you guys out there recently got yourself an Airco DH2. So, go and rig well, my friend. So, did anybody happen to know if anybody makes a 2005 Mustang convertible kit model? I hadn't looked for one, but a friend of mine's got one. I thought that'd be a nice little car to build. We went for, that's the one we took the joyride in. That I might buy. You ride around. Everybody should have a convertible at least once. I went back to work. My FO had a convertible. Yeah, everybody should have a convertible. And he was talking about his like it was his girlfriend. I was like, why'd you sell it? Had kids. Oh, well, family first. I am running into a problem in the Tarbus. And it's a 12 by 12. And you don't appreciate how fast when we first built it seemed like I got room for days, and I am tripping over stuff now. And I'm trying to make myself throw stuff away, but you certainly don't want to throw away paints or anything that you might have a use for. Actually, the empty boxes are out of the way. They're the one thing, ironically, because I got them up under the table now that don't get in the way. For those that didn't know, I used to the shelf over my work table used to be where I kept all the empty boxes, but it basically got full, so I pulled them down, put them under the table, and because of the generosity of you guys, all those models that are up there now are models yet to be built. And I had. It's really hard sometimes to look up there and decide what do I want to build next because there's so much cool stuff. I know I want to do the Caterham. Don't want to get that Betty Bomber, although I have no idea where I'm going to put the Betty Bomber. I want to, a few others I want to do, and I want to do some comparison builds also. But another thing I've run into is the sci-fi shelf. I don't have anything from Space 1999, and one of you guys sent me this beautiful Eagle from Space 1999, and I want to get that on the short list. But I looked at that kit, and that's one of those things that you got to take your time and attention with. There's a lot to it. I want to do a real nice job on that, and I want to. Because I want that for the sci-fi shelf. And I had forgotten about that show and watched an episode or two a while back. And I forgot, it's actually better than I remember it being. And as you guys probably know, you remember the television show UFO. And that was actually going to get a second season. And for reasons, it didn't happen. And so when they did Space 1999... they repurposed a lot of the hardware from UFO, and I always admired the British. They did this magnificent job of practical effects. Their model work looked really good. We knew we knew the submarine was a model, but it looked good, and so that got me motivated to get that done. But when I'll get to it, I have no idea. The Caterham, of course, because recently I've been reading up on the sorry, I put that in the way. Yeah. Been reading up on the Prisoner, and I like Patrick McGowan, but from a few things I've read, he could be a difficult guy to work with. I think he sent more than one actress, crying off the set. Not sure what the whole story is there, but you only hear one side of it. But it's still, I look forward to reading about it. And I think one of the reasons this show resonates so well with so many people is because the underlying idea isn't sci-fi. The underlying idea is freedom, individual freedom. And of course, it had the great Leo McKern in it too. Later played Rumpole of the Bailey. But I heard, yeah. Well, Chris, if you've never seen Space 1999, you have to watch the pilot episode first, or none of it's going to make any sense. And it, I would say, the second season, I guess it got pretty out there. But the first season, they were trying hard. I think they were trying to recreate a little of the magic of Star Trek and interesting style fashions. But this is what was it made the late 60s, early 70s. That's what they thought the 90s fashions would look like, and you could wear those costumes to a disco in the John Travolta area and fit right in. Oh, hey, Ricky. All right. Just got back in the pub. I'm only drinking water today, folks. Just water. But the day is young. So, I was having a chat with my brother, younger brother, the other night. And as usual, after talking about our usual subjects of how to fix everything that's wrong with the world, I saw we started chatting about models we built. Some of his are on the shelf. He did that Mosquito. And as many of us are well at Revell, although had an enormous catalog and a pretty good reputation with cars, it was ironically known as the Model Airplane Company. And the irony behind that was that they actually had a lot of fit and finish issues with their models, especially the 1/32nd scale. But the one of them that they got perfect was the P40E. That's the one where you see the plane flaming the Betty on the artwork. Some people have said it was the best P40 model made. Even today, nobody's actually done anything better. They got everything perfect on it. It fit well. All the parts fit right. So I thought I'd go pick one up. And you're lucky if you can find one for $30 on eBay plus 20 shipping. And I thought about it, and then I looked at all the work I've got to do. I was like, you know what? Last thing I need to do is spend money on a model right now. I've got plenty of good stuff here to work with. Maisto, okay, I have never built one of their kits, but it got me wondering about why some kits turn out so well and some kits don't. When you have a known problem, how come you don't fix it? And then I found out how much it costs to fix a kit, or I should say to fix a mold, which is just unbelievably expensive. Then you realize that a couple of flaws, we all expect certain flaws in a model, and it boils down to the point that they're a business. And their attitude is, if it's not hurting sales, we're not fixing it. And if it does hurt sales, we'll probably take it out of operation. Once they made their money back on the mold, they're not going to fix it. They will probably only address those issues. And Trumpeter did that with that Wildcat that had the flaws in it, and I can't help but think that social media, rapid communications had a lot to do with it. Now you remember these kits were made in the '60s, so they put out their Messerschmitt and their Spitfire and all their one. And this is nothing unique to Revell. I'm just using them as a case, as a test case because it's the one I'm familiar with. You wind up with this kit that, it's okay. They're selling, and it's not like the modelers can talk to each other. And it's one of those things that flaws in the kit and everything, the word just doesn't get circulated. So they sell enough of them. Once they sold enough of them, they've made their money over the next year or two. By this point, when kits maybe start to get a little bit of reputation, and some kid down the line, I wouldn't get that one. Kid has got, well, they've already paid for the mold. They've already made their money off of it, and they sell now as gravy, and they're not about to go and spend, $4,000 or $5,000 in $1968, which would be what, 14 grand, 18 grand today, to go and fix it. And but every once in a while you get that kit that's just right, and the word on that gets circulated, and of course now you can't find them because everybody wanted one. Now, of course, today, if there's a problem with a kit, the word on it gets circulated around the internet in weeks at the most. So they have to fix it. So when Trumpeter found out that they had all these flaws with that early Wildcat, I think it was 132nd scale, I think they actually had a recall. Even Stevens International that imports them had a blurb on their website about we're not going to have them until they fix the mold. And they did. So, give them props for that. The P40Q, yeah. What surprised me was these old fighters was that it's funny that there are aircraft that get a reputation, like the P-39 Air Cobra has this reputation. Oh, it's a lousy dogfighter. Well, yeah, it couldn't get up high, but when I was reading the book on the Akaton Zero, it turns out that when they actually performed the P-39 against the Zero, there were several flight envelopes and altitudes that the P-39 actually had the advantage of the Zero, and it got off the runway quicker, which I found shocking. Not a lot quicker. It just surprised me that it actually took off faster, maybe because it was tricycle gear. But the airplane in some of the low altitude regimes actually had a better climb rate, which I thought was impossible. But apparently they had to do with getting its speed and inertia up faster. Of course, it bled off. But what it did was it left you a certain window's performance. And then it turns out that the P-39 wins the 1946 Thompson race. Nobody saw that coming. Where it beat Mustangs. So how does this airplane that had this mediocre reputation? Well, because it was the way it's being used, low time pilots, sagged with armor, a lot of other stuff. You rip the guns and everything out of it, and all of a sudden it's a hot little performer. Same thing like the P40Q and a few others. It's just, or the N model for that matter. And you realize a lot of times it's not the airframe. P40 had an excellent roll rate, especially above 300 miles an hour, which why a lot of them escape zeros. Yeah, a lot of Zero pilots are scared of P-39, especially that cannon in the nose. But it turns out that, of course, and this brings up a rather interesting subject. We have a lot of hard data that shows that, we're talking hard performance data, that shows these direct corollaries between the experience of the pilots and the Air Force's overall performance. And probably one of the best examples is the Japanese in the Pacific. They are dominating with this very elite force of about maybe 2,500 pilots. But as those guys start getting attrited, and the American pilots and the British pilots are getting more and more experience and better hardware, but mainly it turns out that the hardware isn't the cornucopia. A good piece of equipment poorly flown is just going to create a target-rich environment for a skilled pilot. And the Japanese were coming with better airplanes also. People tend to forget that. Although they flew the Zero throughout the war, by the end of the war it's primarily being used as a kamikaze. They had much better airplanes later on. But what they didn't have was the skilled pilots. A lot of people think this had to do with one decision, and it was the same decision that the Germans made, and it was a bad decision. But of course you have history to show you, is that Japanese pilots, or the experienced Japanese pilots, are basically fly till you die. They weren't being rotated back to teach young pilots the things that they needed to learn. Now, part of this is just because they were hard up for pilots, but the Germans had the same problem. Of course, by 44, we were knocking on their door. But you were not, the knowledge base was not being recycled back into the training. Whereas our guys, you flew your missions, got your experience, you came back and you started teaching young guys. There is no replacement for experience. But there are direct corollaries between the quality of the pilots and the performance of the Air Force overall, which is actually stronger than the corollary between the better equipment and the performance of the Air Force. People forget that the Me-262 and the German jets and rocket planes really didn't have that impressive a record when you get right down to it. They were imposing, they were intimidating, they were fast, they could do a lot of things, but their actual impact in combat wasn't that significant. Now, being short of fuel was part of that problem, but it just, the Germans still hadn't really learned how to use the airplane properly, and they had all of these issues that show there's a much, much stronger corollary between training and experience and performance than good equipment and performance. And I imagine the same thing crosses all boundaries. The same thing could go for race cars or, yacht captains. You can give a guy the best vessel on the water. If he doesn't know how to sail a ship or master his ship, somebody who's... How many times have we seen what should have been a secondary performer win simply because they outperformed the person with the slick equipment? One of the things my brother loves to ask me is what airplane would you want to fly at this point in the war? The outbreak of the war, the American Air Force, P-38. No question about it. The P-39, the P-40, the others, there were airplanes that certainly had their merits. But the P-38 was busted 400 miles an hour up high and fast. As my dad used to say, you could do one thing in a P-38 you couldn't do in any other U.S. fighter. You could come home with an engine out. If I had been in the Japanese Imperial Air Arms, it definitely wouldn't have been flying a Zero in the early part of the war. Later part of the war, probably a George, which was not an airplane to trifle with. The George apparently, was it N1K2? I think, I forget. That airplane apparently could keep pace with a Corsair, and by this point of the war, if you were still alive, you're probably an experienced pilot. An experienced pilot with a George was Mustangs and Corsairs did not trifle with them. And in the German Air Force, actually probably Focke-Wulf 190. The Messerschmitt just was outdated, had too many glitches. Focke-Wulf was a genuinely impressive airplane, and it had that nice wide track gear. It had the quasi-bubble canopy, and that BMW engine made a bit of a target, but not to mention being a radial, you didn't have a coolant system to worry about. The Royal Air Force, a Tempest. The thing about the Tempest, though, is it had that weird engine in it that was really it was hard to get started, and a lot of times they had the crew chiefs had to start the engines for the pilots because they were so temperamental. Once you got them running, but man, that airplane would move. Tempest, basically, the Hawker Sea Fury is more or less the same airplane with a bigger radial on it. A lot of folks forget there's an airplane that's easy to confuse with a Hawker Sea Fury because they had a version of the Tempest that had a radial. And although I've always had a soft spot for the Mosquito, early part in the war, the Mossy, which I think Mosquito was the last British loss of the war. It's also the first thing an Me-262 shot down. That's when the Germans were so happy because finally they had something that could catch the Mosquito, because the Mosquito, just like a real mosquito, was it annoyed the Germans no end. Fantastic little airplane. The Tojo is an airplane that people forget about, and it really looks like a retractable gear GB when you think about it in some ways. And that humongous motor and his dinky little wings, but that little bugger is just teardrop shaped. But that little bugger moved. A lot of the, there are a lot of people that really don't get enough credit. The Italians, for example, it was, I forget which one was, a G50 or was it wasn't the Falgore? It wasn't the Mach C202. I'm forgetting the number offhand because I'm kind of weak on my Italian aircraft, but everyone's favorite British test pilot, Eric Winkle-Brown, test flew the airplane. And he said it was the finest of German, because it had the Daimler-Benz, copy of the Daimler-Benz engine on it, and it had some German technology in it. He said it was the finest of in German engineering with the finest of Italian design. And apparently, by all accounts, it was absolutely, the G50, that's it, thank you. It was absolutely a joy to fly. And fortunately, the Italians didn't get to make that many of them. They were out of the war after a while, but they do, we always joke about Italians, it's kind of a cliche, Italians and maintenance, but think about it. It goes Ferrari, Lamborghini, Fiat, and the Mach C202 and the G50. I mean, when they put their minds to it, they make beautiful machinery. Just perhaps a little temperamental. And the only thing is that you had to be about Winkle-Brown size to fly one. Eric was not a real big guy. And someone with my beef probably would get about into the waist and get stuck. It'd be like sticking me in a Miata. A car that I love but can't fit in. I used to joke I'd have to get 2 Miatas, one for each foot. And just use them like roller skates. But I went and watched that clip from the movie Operation Crossbow where Hannah Reich is flying the Fiesler, or the Fiesler, the V1, and which is based on something she actually did, but that wasn't the airplane she got hurt in. I went and watched an interview with her, and she got her face smashed flying the Comet. What was it? Was it the wheels didn't detach or something? I forget what it was, but she wound up having to put the thing back at the airfield and hit her face in the panel and pretty badly injured. But it just... Hey, this thing's got chemicals in it that if the fuel tank leaks, and by the way, the fuel tanks are up in the cockpit, it will melt you alive. And we're going to send guys in the combat in. Would you mind test flying it for us? God. Woo! Different times. From the generation that gave us, the 8th Air Force and the, guys like the guys who created NASCAR and the real NASCAR. And I'm forgetting Smokey's name again. Smokey Eunuch, is that it? Characters like this, from this brazen group of people, this brazen generation. We've managed to raise a generation that eats Tide Pods. I really think we need to put shop class back into schools, and Yeah, the my understanding is that the suits, the rubberized suits that they gave the German Comet pilots, I mean, it was some protection, but if that C stuff and T stuff started sloshing around in there, it might protect you long enough to jump out. One guy was seeing interviewed actually got a touch of the stuff on his hand. He said he sat there and watched his hand just start right in front of him, and he can't put it out. It's woo, that nasty stuff. Is that manganese permanganate or something like that, and some kind of alcohol. Yeah, Winkle Brown flew one, and I don't know if he flew it fueled or not, but Hannah Rice said it was the biggest thrill of her life, rocketing up in that thing at over 10,000 feet a minute, and there's actually a little airliner. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Dornier 328, the modern day little turboprop airliner, where they made the 328J, which is a jet version of the same airplane, a little high wing. Dornier, they unfortunately, of course, when Dornier went out of business, they kind of disappeared. There's still a few of them flying. Anyway, out of Philadelphia, the airplane, when it got the jet engines on it, would climb so fast that they actually had a special departure out of Philadelphia only for the 328Js, because they had to be at like 10,000 feet and 5 miles or something like that. And you would watch these things go zipping down the runway, nose up, the gears would tuck up, and they would just stand on their tail and go. They weren't going real fast. As by jet standards, they were slow, like Mach 0.64 at cruise. But by golly, they could get out of a tennis court and go up, and they bordered on being a stall plane. And I was saying that'd be a great little jet for like, running around on a small network of places. Like here in Florida, we got like Key West and Marco Island and those places. And you could probably make some money with them that way. Take care, Tom. Good lordy. I think somebody actually finally made a model of that thing too. I always wonder, because I'm always happy to see new kits made, airliners and things like that, some new subject matter. But I think somebody even makes a kit possibly of the Cirrus. But I always wonder, man, how many of those are things are you actually going to sell? How many do you have to sell to make it pay? And I'm assuming that let me close this window here. There we go. I'm assuming that you got to sell conservatively 50,000 units to make a mold pay. Although, from what I understand, is that mold making, there are some people who finally the cost is coming down with changes in technology, that there's finally some price reduction in it. You can get a mold cut for, I've heard numbers as little as $5,000-$10,000. I don't know if that's true. I don't know how good they are, but that was something it could get to the point that if mold making gets low enough, and with modern technology in computers, the fact that you can do 99% of the work computer and then just tell the machine to drill this out, that could be a game changer, because now you might see a lot more niche companies. Although we are seeing quite a few niche companies now, little boutique companies. I kept telling myself I was going to and actually got some of the data for the company Max. There was a company called Max, which became Peerless Max and Schreiber Max. But the history on them was so short, they only made like 13 kits. They were all land military vehicles in one scale. And then when they came to the U.S., they became Peerless Max, which I think was just a local franchise. And then went to Germany and became Schreiber Max. And a couple of years ago, got out by another company and disappeared just that quickly. I don't know if you guys ever built a Peerless Max or Schreiber Max kit, but apparently they made stuff no one else was making, and they kits were pretty good. But I don't know. I have no idea if the company, just couldn't sell enough kits to make it worthwhile, or was it just something some guy was doing for the fun of it, or because some of these model companies aren't really serious attempts. They're kind of vanity. The little small boutique companies are more or less vanity projects. The people commit to them because they make the molds and everything, but they get into it, make something, and sell the molds. I thought that was fun, and they get out of it. And the 3D printers, I don't think 3D printing has really changed the industry, but CAD machines, CNC machines, that has. And I watched that rather lengthy video on the CAD machine making all the parts for the free wing aircraft. Now, of course, on a much larger scale, but the amount of work that goes, I mean, just the millions of dollars the equipment costs to set up, and it's expensive. But if you're a company that's going to make a lot of molds, then you get some sort of an economy of scale. If you were to buy, if I want to start a kit model company, I want to start at Maxsmodels as the model company. I'm not about to go out and buy all that equipment. I'm going to go find somebody that has it and say, hey, can you cut the molds for me? I'm going to find somebody that already has the injection, and hey, can you? It's mostly going to be on contract. Yeah, when you're Revell, Monogram, Aurora, you've got, well, they were already plastics companies to begin with, so they were already set up. But well, Monogram wasn't. Revell and Aurora were already plastics companies. But when you know, like when Monogram decided they were going to move into plastics, they did it in stages, but they did it very successfully. They took their time. I actually looked around for a while. I wanted to get some 148 scale models made. I wanted to have some molds made. I had the insane idea of getting into the business, making general aviation aircraft, particularly those that are like completely out of production, so there wouldn't be any copyright issues or anything. And I couldn't even find anybody who made molds. It was virtually a dead skill. All the people that had CNC machines are like, no, we don't. They don't do stuff that small. But apparently the guys up in Atlantis found some contractor that was able to make some molds for them, and they seem to be content with him. But they're guarding that secret closely. I don't blame them. And then if you do find somebody, he's probably backed up with work. Yeah, I'll get to you in 3 years. That's one reason I had made that mold to make the Big Zero, as I thought about making RCs out of fiberglass, making like pre-molded shells for them. And then when I learned how that process was done, I was like, yeah, there's no way you're going to do that on an economy of scale. And then I started to understand why so many guys run off to China to have this stuff made. It's these countries, the only place you can afford, because they are labor intensive. Even if you had a working molding machine right now, just the rate to run the machine and to have somebody in there spraying the sealant and pulling them out and putting them in the body, it's still labor intensive. Aurora used to send its models out the door to vendors for about 43 cents a piece. Now you think about how many models you have to move to keep a place as big as Aurora going at 43 cents per unit. And all of a sudden you just kind of scratch your head and go, why does anybody go in this business? And companies like Tamiya that, and I mean, Round 2 struggles. I mean, they have to work hard to eke out a profit. You have to make the products that people want. That occasionally they want new stuff, which is a big investment. You've got to, you just keep the whole industry going, the distribution network. The loss of retail has been an enormous hit to these companies. And Nick Argento at Glencoe actually had some hard numbers for me. I forget them off the top of my head, but I mean, we're talking about the loss of retail, the loss of grocery stores, convenience stores, pharmacies. I remember shopping for models at the pharmacy. Rexall Drugs in Quincy had actually probably the best selection of models. And then there was McCrory's and Christo's dime stores, and those were the only 3 places in that town. Once in a while, I'd see models in a like a grocery store, like, what's that doing here? It's and the current molding machines, you can knock out about 1 to 2 a minute, and that's so the machine's going to kick out 6, call it, even if you go 100 an hour, and a lot of times these production runs now are only a few thousand units too. I mean, it's a much harder business to make, and in a lot of ways there's more people in it than there used to be. So I really have nothing but respect for guys like Nick and Pete and the rest of them that managed to keep these companies afloat. Tamiya is kind of in its own world because they're such a world brand, but even they, have to, and they had their own problems when the young heir apparent passed away and everything, and the whole idea behind this industry is pointed at a group, us largely, which just they're not making any more of. us. And I don't know. I think I just talked about this recently, but one of you guys had sent me an Airfix article. It turned out that some of the medical schools are having problems with surgical students who lack dexterity because they've never really done much with their hands more than, text and on an iPad. And they're using model building as a way to help them build their dexterity, or recommending it. And of course, for folks who are maturing, it's recommended as a good way to keep the mind and hands, everything going, and keep your mind bright and your hands sharp as it can be. As long as I got, my 3 lenses to see what I'm doing through, we're in good shape. Hey everybody, this is your captain speaking. Hold on a second. Hey everybody, this is your captain speaking. Walmart is still I think it's still carrying the stuff, but that the Walmart, and of course Kmart's gone. I imagine a few other stores, but they're not ordering them like they used to. I guess they're not selling the way they used to. That was what Advent was all about. That little knockoff company over at Revell that only lasted 1 year. That was just, we're just going to gear it right towards the big box stores, and that was a flop. And Chuck brings up a good point about it's hard to. We grew up using our hands, everything from fixing cars to building models, and of course the ladies were often doing things like needlepoint and stuff, and a few guys too. I always enjoyed that kind of stuff. That was that's kind of that, even that kind of stuff's gone by the way. I can remember my sisters making clothing from patterns. I mean, they were young. It was more, of course, who remembers home ec? Do they even have that anymore? Home economics? That and shop class, 2 of the most important classes. That tells somebody if you're going to go to school and you can read and write and take 2 classes, take home economics and take shop. Learn to do something, kid. And right now, there is such a shortage of plumbers and auto mechanics that my understanding is that if you have that craft and you're like a kid getting started, I've heard wages between 40 and 70,000 starting wages for welders, plumbers, auto mechanics. We can't find airplane mechanics. We're like, kid, go get an A&P, work on a jet. It's. But the nice thing about where I'm at is that there's still a lot of people like us. I work around a lot of people like us. A lot of people that have built models. A few of them, a handful of them still do. Some of them are into RCs. A couple of them have real airplanes, which is something that I had once before. And I'm, as much as, what was that movie with Matt McConaughey? Was it Failure to Launch, where he's talking to the kid under the boat? He works in a boat yard. He tells the kid's talking about, I'm going to own a boat someday. He goes, you don't want a boat. You're not in love with a boat. You're in love with the idea of having a boat. And it's kind of that way with an airplane. I thought about buying an airplane. I was like, what would I do with it? I fly for a job. If I run off and get myself in trouble doing something silly in my own airplane, it could affect my work. And I just really don't have any place to go that I can't drive or hop on the airline and fly for free. And it's when I retire, maybe. But I think that's maybe one of the reasons I enjoy building model airplanes so much. I kind of get to own an airplane without I complain about spending $50 on a kit. If I was to own a Cessna 182, I'd spend that much an hour just about in gas. And they have a new jet out, that Venture. It's the same people that make Cirrus, the Cirrus jet. Little single engine jet, by the way. Little VTOL job. Like $2.7 million or something like that. A new Cirrus, a little propeller-driven Cirrus, little 4-seater. I think they're pushing $1 million. I know a Beechcraft Baron's over $1 million. I'm kind of like, and I know they make 6 or 7 of them a year, but it's just still, oh wow. I went to a flying when I was instructing here in Florida. The flying schools were going like gangbusters. I went to one of the local flying schools here recently, which is actually at the very airport I used to instruct at. The school I was at, Shields Aviation, had 30 aircraft, 32, three airplanes. That's like the whole. Go out to the other airfield, they might have 4, a couple of Cessnas and maybe a light twin. That's it. No one's learned to fly. And in my generation, you talk about we need pilots. You would have had kids lined up around the block for that job. It's just, oh well. I guess it's a generational shift. Same thing with model building. We all know you go to a hobby shop, you find more guys our age. Although I was happy to see that in the Gundam shop, there were a lot of young folks in there, or youngish, I say, 20s. And I was thinking, well, we can use Gundam as a gateway drug. Hey kid, want a free model tank? Go good with your Gundam diagram. Well, guys, so what's everybody working on? Tell me what you're working on. Kids that they can't use a can opener. Yeah, that's... I'm only laughing because I don't want to cry. Bruce, are you still here? Did you decide what you were going to build next? Bruce, you're going to see it in the next Modelers build. He just did a beautiful race car. And... T-55, the classic. I was just watching. The Chieftain, Nick Moran. I think he's a lieutenant colonel now, I believe. I think he's already pinned it on. Anyway, he was giving a speech that they did a live stream on. He was talking about modern tactics and tanks, and he talked about the T-55 specifically, saying that you really need to know what your enemy has, because a T-55 is not a T-55, and he shows 2 different T-55s. One's a fairly original one, and another one's one of the modern ones with all the gear on it. And he's like, these are 2 entirely different threats. When somebody says T-55, what do they mean? Is this just an old school T-55 with nothing special, or is this the upgun reactive armor, active defense system type with all the IR on it and everything? VK-30, okay. Air racing question. Paint gold, yellow. Any company make it? That I don't know that you can mix anything with gold. I don't know. I have always been told that gold and silver are 2 paints that you don't thin and you can't mix. And given my pathetic attempts in the past, I agree. Ooh, Mustang and an SBD. Cool, cool, cool. Taurus, all right. Pirate ship. I like the B-1B. That's going to be a monster. Ooh, the Atlantis Nike Hercules. I've been meaning to get one of those. I think that would look real good on the missile shelf. I think a Nike Hercules would look real good on a diorama way across the shelf pointed over the kaiju. I know that wasn't its job, but it just looks cool. And... had to show him how to stable a target to shoot at it. You didn't tell him, here, kid, just hold it like this. That's a joke, people. Just a joke. Stogie. Jackson. Yeah, the M36. Let's put the biggest gun on the smallest chassis we can and watch the bad guys go boom. I wonder, for those on the M36 Jackson, but it was a big old 90 millimeter on a lightweight chassis. And I was like, it took you guys halfway through the war to figure that one out. I was like, that would have been the first thing I'd have done as soon as somebody said, this is a Tiger tank. Okay, we need to put the biggest gun on the lightest tank we can and go out and kill that thing. The Germans were early on that with their Sturmgeschütz, which, by the way, the Sturmgeschütz, the little, what Americans frequently call the tank destroyer, actually wasn't a tank destroyer initially. It was an infantry support weapon. It had that little short-barreled 50 or 75 on it. And it was intended just to give the infantry some kind of mobile artillery, close in, knock out bunkers and things like that, and was really good at it. It wasn't until later on they started facing a more credible threat. They said, hey, let's put the 75 on it and use it to ambush tanks. Oh, you're doing the BR-01 locomotive. Yeah, I just received a locomotive from a gentleman that I am anxious to get started on. Of course, I'm anxious to get started on all of them. But the Heller Hawker's Tempest. I have a 1/72nd scale Tempest right up on the shelf on top of another one. I was thinking about doing a comparison build, but I think they're different scales. But I wanted at least with the World War One airplanes, I want to do a comparison. I like to compare the older kits and the newer ones and kind of see how they, Mark in Montana has done a lot of the older Aurora World War One aircraft, and he's done some of the newer ones. And although there was a massive price difference in them, you realize that the Aurora, when they originally came out, now with the Aurora, you're paying for the nostalgia, the vintage. But you realize that although the new kits are definitely better, the old Aurora kits, for what you pay for them, are actually pretty good. Those are the molds that Monogram kept, were the World War One aircraft. And I don't know if KB, which was kind of the upscale Aurora World War One airplanes just before Aurora went away, I don't know if it was the KB molds or the original Aurora molds, but I think it was the original Aurora molds. Tornado, F-104, yeah. Horrible NPC Star Destroyer. I've never built the NPC Star Destroyer, so I don't know. I found NPC kits to be okay. They make a lot into like the Star Wars stuff, but like when I did that NPC X-Wing, I had to fight with it to get it together. It definitely, the Bondi one, which is much smaller and is very expensive, I've just heard rave reviews about. In fact, pretty much most of the Bondi kits, the Bondi Millennium Falcon, people can't say it's a 1/144 scale. People just can't say enough good things about it. I'm thinking about when I go back to the Gundam store, USA Gundam, I might get that Boba Fett. And, well, if the M36 was started, well, I imagine that 90mm gun, getting it mounted on there, probably had a lot to do with the, because with getting it work as a whole new system. The M10 guys is basically built on more or less a Sherman suspension system. The Jackson was a newer design. Well, wait a minute. No. I'm getting confused with the Hellcat. I think the Jackson had the same kind of vertical volute system on it. So, I don't know. Maybe it was just getting that 90, figure out how to absorb that 90mm recoil. And I'm getting a little dusty on my tank destroyers. Sometimes get a little confused. We got a group down here, not far from where I live, World War II Armor. They have a Facebook page. That's that video that I posted. They have a Jackson, a 105 Howitzer Sherman, another Sherman, a Hellcat, and that Hellcat moves. That thing is fast. And they have several vehicles. Oh, a Priest, M7 Priest, which is the gun. They also have a 155 long tom cannon, and they got a cut of vehicle to track to tow it with, and they put on armor shows and everything, and they all dress in authentic uniforms, and it's not something that these guys are committed because they all have to have their black powder license from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm to handle black powder charges and everything. So they have to have they have to have background checks. They have to have training on the vehicles. They maintain them, and it's all volunteer. And I think it's great that these guys do that. They're keeping the history alive. And I know people, it's just boys with oversized toys. I'm like, your point? One way, the first thing I did was like, I need to buy a tank. I have an old Battlestar Viper. I got one of the original ones. Now the newer ones, like the ones that Mobius put out, are definitely nicer. But I just want to do the old one for the nostalgia build. I bought one that actually hit the market before the show came on the air. I didn't even know what it was. I just thought it looked cool. I cut it up to make a home movie with and kit bashed it. But I managed to find one for a decent price, and it was complete, and that's the one I have on the shelf now. Of course, it's the one that has the black window, black decal windows. It doesn't have any internal detail. You can buy the internal detail kits, but I wanted it the way. I'm kind of into the nostalgia thing, as you already know. And I have yet to build a Bondi. Well, I better not. That interceptor, that UFO interceptor that my brother gave me, that was a little tricky to build. Not bad. But it had the little spring thing that would launch the torpedo off the end. I was like, yeah, I think the spring broke after like 2 tries. I'm not going to fix that. Just leave it. It's just a display model. But it was also a much older Bondi kit. The new ones, man, they're world class. They're up there with Tamiya and a few of the others. A Gundam bash with a Star Destroyer. Now that's interesting. I could actually see that. Okay, so guys, glad to see everybody's out there building. Um, and yes, I have seen the James Barner movie Tank. I think I got you outgunned. um, great little movie. That was just a fun popcorn movie. The actually keeping a Sherman running isn't all that hard. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's easy, but they were designed to be relatively easy to maintain. And you know, Nick Moran really changed my attitude on the Sherman. I used to think of it as a meh tank, but the more I think about it, it actually was an extremely credible vehicle. Because think about this, it and basically I think the British Matilda, or the Matilda II, are the only tanks that served in every theater. I mean, even the Russians were using the Matilda. I mean, they were both in the desert, they were both in the jungles, they were both across Europe, they were both in the cold regions, and they did relatively well. I mean, not that they were perfect, but you think about the fact, there are a lot of tanks, like a Tiger tank would have been any use in the Pacific. Just getting it there would have been virtually impossible. So they really, the ease of maintenance, reliability, there was a lot going for them. And the Sherman had so much potential, but that's why it was. There's still a country, I forget if it's Peru or Ecuador, who it is, that has a couple of, I want to say, Chaffies or something. But there are some countries where a Sherman would still be a perfectly viable tank. I mean, if you're not fighting a first world enemy. Good luck. How long do the Israelis use them? And effectively. Actually, Gajira, one thing he's talking about, if you got the gun to work, which you have to have the NFA paperwork for destructive device. Actually, the only way the projectiles would need a tax stamp is if they exploded. That goes guys out in Texas that have that Sherman. If I'm not mistaken, it's got the long barrel. They call it 76. It's actually a 75. But if I am not mistaken, they shoot inert projectile, so I don't think they have to pay that. I could be wrong on that. You're getting into destructive devices there, which is its own. I know a little bit about the stuff on suppressors and full autos, the Form 5s and that sort of stuff. But I'm not entirely sure, because I know a lot of guys that have like Civil War. Well, I say a lot. I know a few guys that have like Civil War cannons, and apparently they're just considered muzzle loaders. They get in the quirks of the law. It's like if you take a shotgun and send it to a Class 3 guy and have him bob it off to a sawed-off shotgun and file out all the federal paperwork, it's a $200 tax stamp. But if you buy one of those Mossberg 500 cruisers that comes out of the factory with just a pistol grip in the pump and send it to them, and they just have to lop the barrel off, then it's a $5 transfer tax because it falls in the any other weapon, because since it didn't have a butt stock, it's not considered a sawed-off shotgun. You get some real quirks with that stuff. And Ricky was talking about the Valiant coming out, that'd be interesting. And that's an airplane that never gets any love. You know, the V-bombers, the Valiant, the Vulcan, and the Victor. And to me, the Victor still looks like the airplanes you would expect to see in the Klingon Air Force. It is one of the most interesting looking airplanes ever made. And, of course, the Vulcan's just James Bond cool, literally. But the Valiant, everybody forgets about it. And they go, well, it had a short service life. They had wing cracks. And all this. The airplane was there when the British Air Force needed it. Yes, it was a conservative design. It's not a particularly sexy airplane, but it was available. Much like the Brewster Buffalo. I think that's an airplane that doesn't get enough love. There are a lot of airplanes out there that had short service lives that maybe weren't, but they were there when we needed them. And I think the British had a very pragmatic approach when it came to the V bombers. Let's make a very basic, conservative airplane that we know will work, and the more radical designs we can get, that'll give us time to get the more radical designs, get the bugs worked out of them. And the Vulcan, I think that mock-up, that full-sail mock-up they sunk for the James Bond movie, I think it's still down there. I think people still dive on it. It's like a tourist thing. It was made mostly out of wood, I believe. God only knows what's being underwater all that time would have done to it. But and my understanding also is that, of course, none of those airplanes have a copious amount of space. B-52s are incredibly tight inside, but my understanding is the Vulcan had a particularly tight cockpit on it. And the Victor, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, but somebody was telling me that you actually had to crawl over something to get in the cockpit of a Victor, that wasn't an actual doorway, but I may have misunderstood what he was saying. Has anybody here ever been inside a Victor, crawled around the cockpit? There's actually a movie with, was it Rod Taylor? Where at the end, people are trying to steal a Victor. Some spies are trying to steal a Victor. He has to fly it back, and he doesn't know how to fly. But you actually got a little bit of interior footage on the airplane, and that was interesting airplane. And I think they finally retired the last one. I could be wrong on that. By the way, Ray is mentioning about the plans for the 22 caliber Gatling gun. Did you know that there's a guy, and it's a, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a full auto, so you have to get all the paperwork. But there's a guy who made like a 22 caliber miniature 50 cal, and I may be getting confused. Something that's probably on YouTube, but that's the only way you can afford to fire one of those things. And oh, by the way, you guys remember a movie called Catch-22? Pops P-51 was talking about crawling to the nose of the B-25, and yes, you have to crawl in. And same with the B-17. I will get one that's like, but because you're literally going under the cockpit. And Ricky, folks want a link. The movie Catch-22. Did you guys know that one of the cameramen fell out of the airplane, was killed? This guy, it was just kind of bizarre. The guy had been injured and lost a leg in another accident while filming a movie. And I don't know if he was the director of photography or just one of the cameramen, but apparently I guess he was hanging out of the back of the airplane. He refused to wear a safety harness. He was, live for today, for tomorrow I die type. And personally, he had a screw loose, but but anyway, they were filming one of the scenes, and I think one of the airplanes passed by real close. They caught the prop wash or something. But anyway, maybe he fell out of the airplane and fell to his death, and running the camera. And hey, yeah, what is chocolate coated cotton? You think the boys will eat this? What is that? Captain Usarian, you're AWOL. And that was when I saw it as a kid, I completely everything went right over there. I don't get it. Ooh, airplanes. What's going on? They're stop shooting. Those are our planes. What are you talking about? Yeah, we paid the Germans. We bomb our own airfield and they take all the cotton off our hands. Bill, it's great seeing you, man. Glad you could make it. That airplane, those airplanes, a lot of them came from Tall Mance, and I think they shot a lot of it down in Mexico. And they actually, Mance had a bunch of the airplanes afterwards, and the one with Milo Meadow, whatever his name was, the MM on the side. Apparently, that sat outside at his facility for a few years. There's pictures of it just sitting there collecting dust. And as much as Mance and Tallman loved airplanes, obviously they're expensive to keep them up. So when they didn't have anything to do with it, they just parked them out there. And I think that museum they had, I wish I could have gone there, but that was a brilliant idea. And but now there's a model. Get a B-25 and do Milo's airplane, or better yet, if you've got a bunch of models that you want to put together that don't go together, just if they're along the same scale, just put them all parked together on a desert platform, put a little chain link fence around it, and just put Paul Nance Museum. What was the name of that museum they had out there? Just put a museum in front of it. I thought one way somebody was like, well, all these models are wrong scale. What do you do with it? I know what to do. Put all the models together in a diorama and then put a film crew there. And that way it's just, a film crew making a movie. And, well, guys, yep, it's going on 4:00, which is when I said I would, told my wife she's got some things for me to do too. And I'm really so grateful everyone could come out. I hope you're having a wonderful Father's Day. And I'm going to go ahead and shut down the old camera in there, but I'll leave the comment stream up for a while as usual so that you guys can enjoy chatting with each other for a while. So I'll leave that up for about 10 minutes or so. So guys, take care. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful Father's Day. And of course, as always, guys, model on.